employee position and compensation changes in Dayforce. Okay, so on today's agenda, I'll be doing an introduction of myself as well as the support services section, position change process, required documents, compensation change form, required documents, workflow and approval process, and then we'll have questions and answers. All right, so introduction. The support services team consists of myself, the HR generalist, Rainier Vicente, the senior HR technician, Kendra Bedoni, senior HR technician, and Aileen John, senior HR technician. I myself report to Serenity Nigel, who presented earlier today, who is the HR classification and pay manager. And then if you guys have any questions, I'll also be providing information as far as each of the HR technicians assigned divisions. So that way you can refer your specific questions to that individual. All right, so the position change process. The position changes occur when employees move from one position to another. Managers will utilize the position change form when completing one of the following personnel actions: promotions, demotions, transfers, acting status assignments. All of these actions involve a position change form. It can either be internal or outside of their current program. For example, an employee is being promoted within DPM, that would be an internal action. If an employee is being promoted from DPM to another department, then that's considered an outside action. However, I'll be going through each of these and I'll provide a demo of an action. I'll be going over a promotion, just so that way you guys can get an idea of how the flow process works, the steps to take when in Dayforce, the approval process, as well as navigation. Okay, so required documents for position change process involve justification memorandums, referrals if the employee applied for the position, individual assessment if the employee submitted a letter of interest for a position. They don't necessarily need to apply for the position, and it doesn't necessarily need to be advertised. So there are two processes that can occur for position changes. Also required is the navigation employment application for employment. Pretty much a standard process. A lot of this information is available on the PAF samples, and we'll be providing guides as well as step-by-step instructions later on as we transition to Dayforce. A position change process. I'll be going over a quick demo of an employee being promoted to an HR analyst position. So I'll go ahead and pause slideshow here, and then I'll go ahead and go over that process. Okay, so I'm navigating to Dayforce, and I'll be logging into our test environment here, just to give you an overview of the steps and the processes that managers need to take. So I'll log into Dayforce utilizing my manager role. Hold on one moment. Okay, so again, my manager role here. Currently, I only supervise one employee because my information hasn't been updated in a test environment. So we'll go ahead and go through Jennifer Sosi as an example, because I do supervise her and she isn't under my position hierarchy. So in order to make a position change, we would navigate to the employee, and you can see your team here. So you can just select the individual and then view their profile. So the changes, the forms that you need to initiate any type of changes to an employee's information will be in the Forms tab here on the left-hand column. So I'll go ahead and select Form, and there will be two forms that will show in the production environment. There will be a compensation change form and then a position change process. They're essentially forms, however, process entails like a step-by-step process where it also includes the ability to upload supporting documents. So for this, I'll go ahead and select the position change process. This will then, a window will display to show the position change process, the employee name, and their employee ID. So here there are two steps that you must complete for each position change, and then you have the ability to either select next, save, submit, or print the action before you submit it. So we're going to select position change. And again, the scenario that we had was that Jennifer would be promoting to the HR analyst position, which did occur. So we'll just go ahead and update that in the test environment. So you can select this drop down and it'll show you the current position information for this employee, when they started in this position, as well as if it's their primary position, their manager. Again, my data hasn't been updated in the test environment, so I'm still showing up as my previous position title. So here I'll go ahead and and then when you're doing a position change, you never want to edit this record here. If you do, it'll error out from you. So what you always want to do is select add, and this adds a new change. That way there's a history of the actions that occurred for this employee. So for this, when you select add, the drop down will show, so you can just begin editing this data here uh, to reflect the personnel action that I'm processing. So for this, I'm going to utilize an effective date of June 21st. Then primary position, you'll always make sure that this is selected. Interim position, again, if you're unsure of any of these items, you can hover over the question mark, which will give you a brief description of what this field entails. So the effective due date, you'll leave that blank unless you're end dating the previous record. So for this reason, I'm going to indicate promotion, and you can either begin by typing the action, or you could just scroll down. But it's always simple to type in the action. And then the managing position, again, this is going to be the HR analyst position, I believe, under recruitment. So for now, I'll go ahead and indicate the employee's manager, which would be Aaron. Oh, I believe it may be Charlotte. Let's just double check. Yeah. So Charlotte is our HR director, and she'll be the managing position. So with this change, her Jennifer will then report to Charlotte as well. It doesn't show here, but I'm just going to take a position, the administrative assistant position, and then here the work site will populate, and this is all based off of the position information that was set up in our position hierarchy in our position module. So those options are available. Again, the only time that a position will display here is if the position is vacant. So if the position's not showing up here, either the position is not vacant or they don't report to this to the HR director. So that's something to keep in mind. So now that I've selected the managing position, the position name, and the primary location, I'm going to select next. So this moves to step 2, which is the document upload. Again, there are specific requirements for different types of actions. However, because this is a promotion, the supporting documents that are required are either a letter of interest, an individual assessment, the navigation application, as well as a justification letter memo. I'm not going to add anything here, but the process is you could either browse for the files on your system, or if you have a separate window open, you can just drag and drop those documents here. The document will then display, at which point you can select upload. So I'll go ahead and select submit with the understanding that I hypothetically attached a document, okay? All right, I'm going to submit. And now this goes through a workflow process. Form was submitted successfully. Again, you'll get an error if there was an error, or a green check mark if the action was submitted successfully. So I'll go ahead and close out. Again, it will also say submitted here with a green check mark. So I'll go ahead and close that. The forms guided process were sent through submission. This will always pop up. There are forms for this guided process that were not sent through the submission. They do not have to be filled out again if they were previously submitted. You do not have any changes to make. So I'll go ahead and select continue. So now I've submitted the position change form for Jennifer. So again, if you submitted any type of forms in this section, you can select the form submission tab here, and it will show a history of those items. However, we are in a test environment, so these items are pretty slow when it comes to showing up here, anything that was submitted, so we would just give it a few minutes. However, they would populate here. So now that I've submitted that position change, it'll go through the workflow process, meaning it will go to the HR admin, which is the DPM staff. They will review the personnel action and approve it. I believe Serenity did go over the workflow management. However, in order to see that, I'll go ahead and just to show you, I'll navigate to my client admin role, and then I'll go ahead and look for the workflow management so that we can see the personnel action that was submitted. So for this, we did utilize the position change form. So I'll just go ahead and search here. That way we can limit the process, position change process, apply filter. So, and it should show the most recent action that was submitted, including the workflow approval process, okay? So again, it starts with the initiated by the manager. Thereafter, it goes to routing to the HR admin. And then the decision is the support services staff would either approve or disapprove the action or return it to the manager for, say, for example, if they're lacking any supporting documents. At that point, the support services staff would notify the manager of any discrepancies or any information that was not attached. So if it's rejected, then a notification for rejection would go to the manager and the employee. At which point, if it was rejected, the manager would have to resolve whatever issues were there were for that rejection, and then they would have to resubmit the flow process. However, if it was approved and then it goes through the process and notifying to the manager again and to the employee of that approval action, and then it would then be ended. Okay, so again, that's just a really brief and quick overview of the position change process. Um, so any type of changes, they would be handled either through a position change or a compensation change. However, I'll go ahead and we'll go back to the PowerPoint here. Then we'll go ahead and scroll back to our compensation change. So again, there's the position change form and the compensation change form. Compensation change forms occur when employees' pay rate changes. Managers will utilize the position change form when completing one of the following personnel actions. Again, they're not limited to these personnel actions. Again, if there was a promotion that involved a compensation change, then this form would also need to be submitted to account for those changes to the employee's pay rate, either their exempt status or anything like that. So again, these following personnel actions are performance step increase, general wage adjustment, rate adjustment per the compensation study. And there are additional actions. However, these are the primary changes. So required documents for any type of compensation change. The required documents are approved step increase recommendation and approval form. Those are for performance step increases and other applicable documents, memos or anything like that. Those won't really there's really no requirements for a compensation study change, a general wage adjustment change, or a cost of living adjustment change. Again, if you have any questions or if you would like to know what type of documents are required, majority of the time you can refer back to the PAF sample. However, again, we are developing guides and documentation to help assist managers when they're initiating these type of changes. Okay, so for the compensation change process, I'll be going over a step increase for my employee, which was Jennifer again. So I'll go ahead and navigate to Dayforce, just so that way we can go through that process again. Again, I am logged in as my manager role, which allows me to see my team members. So here I'll go ahead and select Jennifer again, and then action. So there's upload transaction. Okay, so I'll go ahead and that. And then here I'll select view profile. Again, you can either navigate directly to the employee that you supervise profile by selecting your team member, or you can look for that individual in the People tab. But for this, I'll go ahead and navigate directly to the employee because it's a lot simpler than trying to enter their AB number and all of that. Here, it's just streamlined directly to the employee's profile. So here again, I'll go ahead and select Forms on the left column, and here I'll initiate a change form, a compensation change form. So here, these are the standard fields when entering a compensation change form. It is all self-explanatory. However, for this type of scenario, we're going to be updating a performance step increase. So for the effective date, depending on when this step increase was approved and when their anniversary date is, that you'll want to make sure that that's the effective date. But for this scenario, we'll just go ahead and use any date. And for this, I'm going to select June 25th. And then the next option, majority of the time, all the fields that are required will have a red asterisk next to the field description. So if you fail to submit any of these fields, then the form will error from you won't fill out to submit it. For this, again, you can scroll down. However, if you know what type of personnel action you're doing, you can simply start typing as well. So with performance step increases, the pay type, the pay class do not change. So these are what the employee's current values are. So you'll always leave those values as is. Again, normal weekly hours are not changing as well. The only thing changing is the employee's base rate. So 1829 is currently, we'll go ahead and change that to the next step according to the salary schedule, which is 18. Again, the pay grade will show here, and currently the data in the test environment is still utilizing the old salary schedules. So this is the reason why you see CL. And when you look at the salary schedule and the employee's current grade, this minimum reflects step A, the maximum reflects step L. So just some information there. The control rate is typically the middle of the two minimum and maximum. However, it may differ, but this is don't pay too much attention to the control rate. So for here, average daily hours, we're not making any changes to any of this information because it's not changing with a performance step increase. Again, you have the ability to enter any comments if need be. And then the only thing with this process is it's a little different than what's in production. I'll go ahead and submit just to see it. However, in production, the compensation change form is changed to a compensation change process. And that is very similar to the position change process with the two steps where you can enter the information, and then the second step is attaching any supporting documents. So in the test environment, this process is a little different. It's kind of outdated because we've made a few configurations. However, that compensation change form, again, will be a compensation change process, which will allow you to upload any supporting documents. So again, going back to the position change where I had indicated that we're going to be having a pending action. It looks like someone had submitted this for approvers. So again, it shows all the individuals with the HR admin role. However, it won't be going to Sharon because she's with Judicial Branch. So we'll go ahead and remove her. I'll just go ahead and indicate Rainelia because she is one of our technicians. So we could view details. Oh, I guess that's an error. Okay, so that errored out. However, so here we have a document upload. Again, that was with the previous position change form where we were able to make that change. So if I close out of this and then now I can then see any actions here. So there was a document upload transaction for Jennifer Sosi, which is awaiting review. Again, I'll go ahead and navigate back to the PowerPoint really quickly. Oops. So again, that's the workflow approval here. So we have workflow approvals. So the action is initiated by the manager. That'll always be the driving force when it comes to these type of personnel actions or any type of action. However, there are scenarios where it's not initiated by the manager. Instead, it would be initiated by the employee. For example, an address change form, updated tax forms, or anything like that. Those are initiated by the employee. Um, again, we will be providing documentation, step-by-step processes, and a guide that will assist you in this process. So don't feel intimidated. We will help you whenever you need be. Again, but going back to the workflow approval, personnel action is initiated by the manager. They're submitted to DPM, which are the HR admin roles for review and approval. The next step is reviewed and approved by DPM support services staff. Notification to the manager and the employee of approval. So that's the step here, or disapproval if the action was rejected. And then the employee's record is updated in Dayforce when the next stage is in. Okay. So again, this is really a quick overview of the steps. However, if you guys have any information, again, there's also videos available in MyPath that do have videos and step-by-step processes for you guys to make those type of changes. So you can go to help, and then those informations here. For example, if you wanted to navigate to help, we do have the Navigation MyPath, which have courses available, and it does provide you with your completion. And say, for example, you wanted to learn a certain type of changes within Dayforce, all of that information is available to employees, managers, and basically all employees of the Navajo Nation. So here, updating your profile information, again, changing your password, entering emergency contact information. And we'll just look at that just to give a quick overview if for the employees that have not gone to MyPath. So here, course description, again, it will provide you with a video, which you can either see or you can try it. Again, you can select see it. And here is a video. I don't know if you can hear the sound. I could hear it on my end. It is reading through the information and it's providing scenarios. So you can follow through the video. And then also you could, whoops, sorry about that. Let's go back there. So you could either select the video by seeing it, or you can try it. And here it'll give you navigation step by step items which you can go through and make those type of changes yourself by selecting next. And then it tells you to open up the menu here and navigate to profile, forms, and then scroll here. So we'll go ahead and scroll down. Emergency contacts. So you'll click emergency contacts and then you can update that information. So a lot of these videos are available in MyPath for various scenarios. So in your free time, I recommend that you do review those videos in MyPath, and it's for managers or employees or for supervisors as well. So a lot of that information is there. So again, going back to the information here, view profile, you do have options to see various forms. Again, request leave of absence is to request for any type of absence for like family medical leave, approved leave without pay for 15 or more days, different scenarios for request of leave of absence. A lot of employees do get this mixed up with the form utilized to request for personal time off. So again, that's a separate form and you should not be utilizing this if you're submitting a request to utilize annual leave. Again, the return to work is the form that would be utilized if you're on any type of leave of absence. So when you're returning, you or your manager would need to complete this form for you. Shift rotation change forms are for employees who have, for example, public safety, emergency medical services, Navajo Police Department. They have different shift schedules where their standard tour of duty is outside the 8 to 5. So here they would request for shift changes that are depending on when their changes occur to their schedules. Terminate an employee Here, I'll go ahead and review this form just real quickly with you as well. So this form is used whenever an employee separates from employment with the Navajo Nation. Again, there are asterisks where the required fields need to be completed. For example, here I'll just indicate June 25th. And then there are three options to select from: resigned, retired, or terminated. So these items are pretty self-explanatory, but if you have any questions regarding any of these, or if you're unsure, then you can reach out to us as well, and we can provide that assistance to you. We can also, if you would like, or any of your managers, if you have any questions or any type of personnel actions that you would like guidance on, there are systems available here at DPM kiosks where we can walk you through that process one-on-one. So if you need that information, don't hesitate to stop by or schedule an appointment with one of your assigned HR technicians, and we can definitely assist you through that process. The reason, so for the reasons, it's a little different than the status. But you'll want, if, say, for example, you selected resigned, you'll want to ensure that you utilize that same reason as well as the status. Eligible for rehire, yes. There are scenarios where if it's a termination for any type of any issue, rarely do we utilize no. If you're unsure, again, you can just indicate not answered. Last pay date, this data is not required, as well as a termination notice date are not required. Again, you do have the ability to upload files as supporting documents. Again, with the resignation, any type of required document would be a resignation letter that's signed and dated by the employee. So you can select upload file, you can browse for the file in your system, or you can drag and drop the document here. If you, for example, you drag the incorrect file, then you can just clear the list and it'll remove that attachment for you. Again, you do have the ability to add comments here. For example, whatever type of scenario that may come up, and you want to ensure that DPM is aware of any issues or whatever you had encountered, you can add those comments here. And then you can save a draft if you want to, if you don't want to submit now, however, you still want to revisit this, say you forgot what the effective date was, you can save a draft and you can go back to your documents to find out the effective date and fill it in. Again, you can also print the item before submitting. However, it's not necessarily required because with the flow process, you are provided with information as far as any submittals, any approvals, any disapprovals that will always be sent to your email or your notifications, which is a little message envelope there. In those notifications, you'll also have the ability to see the form that was submitted and any comments or anything like that as well. And you do have the ability to print those documents at that time as well. So best practice is to print the document until after it's been approved so that you have the approvals indicated, the timestamps to when those approvals occurred, and all of that information as well. So again, that's the terminating employee form. And then there's professional forms. So the professional forms, again, are the compensation change form and the position change process. And then just to navigate to my employee hourly role, I'll go ahead and show you different forms that are available depending on the type of role you're in. If you're a manager or if you're logged in as your own employee profile, then you do have access to a few more other forms. So here, I'll go ahead and navigate to profile. So here we do have contact information, emergency contacts. Again, going back to this information, it is imperative that you do update your address. Your primary address will always be your physical address, and then your secondary address or mailing address, you can indicate as such. And here, if I were to edit, you can say, for example, a lot of the times employees want to have their primary address they want to have on their tax documents or their W-4. However, if you select into the address, your primary won't necessarily be utilized unless you don't have the option selected. Say, for example, myself, I prefer having my PO box on my W-4 and my tax documents. So I'll select my mailing, and then I'll just select these two options here. At which point then I can save. And so that means my W-4 and all my tax documents will reflect my mailing address as opposed to the physical address. So when you also in your forms tab, you do have different notifications, preferences, security apps. A lot of those things we don't really have set up. However, if you want to, you can navigate to it. Personal information, work information, and then your banking information and your accruals. I don't really mind that you see my accruals. It's fine. Again, the test environment has a lot of outdated data, so it's fine. It's not correct. So for here, forms, these forms are available to all employees when they're logged into their employee role. Again, there are a lot more. We have 18 different forms for employees. So here we have voluntary self-identification for disability, address change forms, confidential information form, contact details, emergency contacts, name and marital status. Again, all of this information is required for onboarding employees to complete. So they are given a certain amount of time to complete these forms when they're hired, which is through the onboarding process. So for professional, again, direct deposit form or meeting payment form, which are for your boards, committees, and commissions when they want to submit payment forms for stipends or any type of meetings that they've attended. So that form is for the meeting payment form. Again, tax forms, A4 Arizona, District of Columbia. Again, we put the forms here where we have employees. So we do have employees in different states throughout the United States. So if they have a specific tax form for that state, we do ensure that we have it uploaded here so that employees do have the option and ensure that their taxes are set up correctly. So again, make sure that you do fill out your forms if you haven't, and direct deposit information if you haven't, your addresses, your confidential information. We can just go ahead and view these items quickly. We are running out of time, but I'll go ahead and go over these personal forms here. So address change forms, again, you do have the ability to edit any information here, or you can add. And the best practice, again, is never delete, always add a record if you have any type of change. You are able to end date the previous record here, and then you can add a new record if you would like to update your address to a certain date. So if you add, then you'll just select the type. Again, you have mailing, primary, and secondary. And then you can add the effective date. Again, the country, United States of America or Canada. We don't really have any employees outside of the United States. So it'll always be one or the other. We don't have any Canada employees, so you'll never select Canada, just the United States. Address line 1, address line 2, address line 3 are self-explanatory. So this information, you'll want to make sure that you update it. City, again, is a required field. And then the county is not a required field. If you know your county where this specific address resides, then you'll indicate the county. However, again, it's not a required field. State and province is a required field. So again, you have all 50 states, including, I believe, the District of Columbia, which is Washington, D.C. And then zip code and postal code, again, self-explanatory. You can upload any documents here if you'd like. However, it's not a requirement if you're doing an address change form. And then again, any comments if you would like for the reviewing officials, which is DPM admin to review, then you can make those changes as well. I believe the flow process actually for address change is that it goes directly from the employee to their record. So if you make that change, then it'll be updated to your record. And then Serenity can correct me if I'm wrong about that. All right, so again, the next form is a confidential information form. So this information is to hide my social, date of birth, your disability status, and then you can add your gender, your ethnicity, your veteran status. So for veterans, I'm not a veteran, so I'll just go ahead and update that to, oh, actually, I won't update that because I'm not a veteran. Ethnicity, so here I'll go ahead and add my ethnicity, which is American Indian or Alaska Native. And then effective date. Primarily, it's best to utilize your hire date if you know it when making these changes. However, current date is fine as well. And then again, I doubt that you would ever change your ethnicity, so you should only have one record here. And then you can submit. So for this, I'll go ahead and submit, even though it's in the test environment. And then contact details. So here you'll want to update any phone numbers or email addresses that you may have. Again, a lot of the email addresses or electronic notifications are automatically sent within the messages. So you could you could select an option to have any email notifications emailed to your Outlook email as well. For example, your Navajo-NSN email. You could do that as well. And then emergency contacts. Again, you can indicate your emergency contact information, relationship, and then their contact information. All of that can be submitted here. And with any of these forms, again, you have the ability to print if you would like to have a personal record of that. A paper record, I know that a lot of our employees do still prefer having a document, a paper document. However, with the ERP, again, our focus and our goal with implementing the ERP system is to go paperless. So, yeah. And then name and marital status. Again, here, another form that you can fill out and submit. If, for example, your marital status changes, you marry, you divorce, or something like that. Again, any type of marital status changes, you'll want to upload any files to document that change. I'm not too sure if this information is triggered with employee benefits. I'll have to double check that. However, any comments, again, they can be initiated or indicated there and then submitted for approval. So all of that information is self-explanatory. Again, you can select direct deposit, at which point you can set up multiple different direct deposit accounts, depending on if you want to have a certain percentage for one or the other, or so on and so forth. Again, that's self-explanatory. Tax forms, again, this information is self-explanatory. However, we'll look at the federal W-4 form. So when you select a form, it'll come up with the form, and then you can make any changes to your taxes here. And then you can select the option to submit it. If you do submit it, it'll automatically sign the document for you. And then all of that information here. So these changes, depending on when they're made, will reflect on your payroll with the next pay cycle. So those are different tax forms. So this is just a really high level overview of any forms or personnel changes that occur within Dayforce. Again, there are some processes that may not be easily handled within Dayforce. So again, we're working on guides, manuals, documentation to assist the managers and employees in those type of scenarios. Again, we do have the MyPath videos as well as any trainings or webinars or anything like that. We also have those videos available. And I'm not too sure where they're at, but Ramondo can share more information in reference to that. Okay, so that's just a really quick overview of the position change, the personnel changes, compensation changes, and any personal information changes. So going back to the presentation again, workflow approvals, I've gone through that process. And then if there's any questions that you guys have, you can put them in the chat. And any of this, I believe the support services staff are available online as well, and they can answer your questions accordingly. Other than that, you can also contact your senior HR technician assigned to your division, or you can email the ERP support email group. Again, our IT staff have been responding quickly to any questions or any issues that you have that are occurring, or that any employees may be running into. Again, we also have kiosks here available at DPM. If you would like to have that one-on-one with any of the DPM staff to go over those type of changes or assistance. Um, but that is all for my presentation. Again, my name is Garrett Sosi. There's my contact information. I'm the Human Resources Generalist with the Support Services section.